Perhaps every young woman fantasizes about becoming a princess, beautiful, wealthy, and renowned, living happily ever after, just like in a fairy tale. Kristin Johnson was no exception. She enjoyed a joyful childhood and harbored grand ambitions during her youth and adulthood. Her aspiration was to achieve fame, and she did, though not through exceptional talent, but due to the extraordinary cruelty of her killer. Kristin Johnson was born in Santa Clara, California, USA, in 1981. He lived with his parents, Teresa and Kirk Johnson. As a toddler, he relocated with his parents from California to the small town of Saugatuck, Michigan. It was a quiet, peaceful town with a tranquil harbor and a population of less than 1,000 people. The town possessed a cozy, charming atmosphere. It seemed to be the safest environment for building a prosperous future. The crime rate was remarkably low. Locals didn't bother to lock their home doors, showing no fear of intruders. The community thrived on the foundation of everyone knowing each other. Young Christine had an older brother, Derek, by just a few years. Their family presented as friendly and content. However, the family's idyllic life was disrupted when the Johnsons decided to separate. They maintained amicable relations for the sake of their children. Christine and her brother lived alternately with their father and mother, as dictated by the care plan. Because of this arrangement, the girl quickly became involved in household tasks. She began assisting her mother from the age of 12. This included managing the family budget. Christine tried to find employment to gain independence and avoid having to ask her parents for money. Later, the elder brother joined the army, eventually deciding to become a professional military man. Meanwhile, the girl was attending high school. Becoming independent, Christine took complete control of his life. He was aided by his intelligence, as well as his inherent beauty. At the same time, he was very cheerful, lively, and an engaging conversationalist. Christine looked fantastic, partly because of his active and healthy lifestyle. His relatives admired the girl's beauty and encouraged him to pursue Hollywood. He was most fond of sailing, surfing, and anything associated with water. He enjoyed these sports when he visited his grandmother in California. However, Kristin always missed his favorite hobbies when he returned to Michigan, and it took him some time to readjust. Here, he was fond of theater, being a member of a small acting club. During the winter, the girl worked as a waitress in a local cafe. She was a genuine asset to the owner of the establishment, as she was very pleasant, polite, and sociable, attracting more customers. During this time, the girl increasingly contemplated leaving their small town of Saugatuck. The quiet atmosphere of the province was not for him. Christine thought he deserved more and desired a different life than serving food in cafes. He felt there were no significant prospects for him in this city. In 1999, he graduated from high school, finally having enough freedom to begin building his life and pursuing success. After reflecting on his situation, the girl decided to embark on a quest for self-discovery. He traveled to different cities, worked, and experimented in various fields. Eventually, he decided to settle in California in 2000, which he loved so much. It had a pleasant climate and offered far more opportunities to realize his potential. Initially, he moved in with his grandmother in Santa Maria, a small resort town with a population of 100,000 people. However, despite being near all his favorite pastimes, Christine prioritized the important matters. The first thing he did was look for a job to support himself. It was very important to him. The girl got a job as a system administrator at the city's electric power company. Then he began to focus on his education. He decided to enroll at the University of California. The school was quite a distance away, 40 minutes from his grandmother's house. He enrolled there and bought a car with the money he had earned. However, even with a car, it was still a challenge to travel that far. It consumed a lot of the girl's time. So Christine started to search for a job closer. That's how he first brushed against his dream, Hollywood. He managed to secure a part-time job with a film crew planning to make a movie. The experience of performing in a theater club allowed him to adapt to the new work environment. As a result, he was hired as an assistant on the set of a thriller. Here, he met people who lived in Hollywood. It was a real star moment for a girl from the province. He socialized with world-famous actors and directors and was incredibly happy. Kristin could hardly believe he was socializing with celebrities. He was completely absorbed by the world of movies. This work inspired him so much that young Kristin wanted to be closer to this field. He enrolled in professional makeup courses, where he was taught by Hollywood makeup artists. Having mastered these skills, he considered becoming a makeup artist on a movie set. To do so, he was going to travel to Los Angeles, the city of dreams. Although it was quite a risky journey, his curiosity outweighed his fear of the unknown. The girl was drawn to Hollywood, and as a result, he moved to Los Angeles, home to several famous movie studios. It was a real period of temptation for the young beauty, but he demonstrated the best standards of decency that only a young woman is capable of. He did not live a boisterous lifestyle, despite the prevalent trends in the community he found himself in. He avoided hangouts and parties. The girl was quite modest. He had a boyfriend he met a couple of years ago and kept in touch with despite the distance. Then he moved in with her. They decided to rent an apartment together in Los Angeles since 2002. The young people were not yet financially stable, so it was beneficial for both of them. It wasn't an easy journey, but the girl didn't despair and began to search for a new job for permanent employment. However, it wasn't easy. The girl only found various part-time jobs. There was no serious work, and most of their budget was earned by her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the relationship between Kristin and Todd was worsening. Kristin later complained to his mother that verbal altercations with his boyfriend increasingly ended in physical violence. He was trapped in a toxic relationship that was financially strained. His mother began searching for a new place for her daughter to move out. Kristin ran away from his boyfriend, settling into a small apartment. He continued to study remotely. At this time, his father was providing significant financial support to Kristin. He hoped that his daughter would finally find his place and vocation in life, so he wanted to help him. By November 2002, Kristin finally got a job at a cell phone company. However, the position was far from his ideals. Neither the field of work nor the income met his expectations. Besides, he couldn't find a suitable place to live near work. My mother had located a comfortable home in Santa Monica, a neighboring city to Los Angeles. This house was to be shared with two other girls. It was close to the beach in a bustling bedroom community. This setting seemed perfect for me to start fresh, so I moved there. During this time, I transferred to the University of Santa Monica. My dreams of Hollywood stardom didn't materialize as I struggled to build a career. My relationship fell apart, and I essentially had to rebuild my life. However, I didn't give up hope and continued to pursue my dreams. On February 15, 2003, I planned to attend a party. Beforehand, I went to a shopping center. I spent a lot of time talking to my mother on the phone, discussing my future plans. This was the last call I made to my loved ones. The following day, Sunday, February 16, 2003, my mother waited for my call to hear about the previous day. But I didn't call. She tried to reach me, but the phone was unavailable. Initially, she wasn't overly concerned, assuming I might be resting or working. However, when I still hadn't contacted her the next day, she grew worried. Around 9 a.m., my mother called me at work. I was always available by phone, but this time, the answering machine picked up. My mother then contacted my manager, who informed her that I hadn't shown up for work. He emphasized that I was a very reliable employee with no history of tardiness or absences in the past 3 months, making my absence very unusual. They couldn't reach me either. According to the manager, I was last seen on February 14th. One of my colleagues at work mentioned that I was going to a party. My mother went to my social media page, but found no useful information about the party. I hadn't posted any photos from the event, even though I had previously documented nearly every aspect of my life. She also checked my bank accounts, but there had been no transactions since I stopped contacting her. My mother called all the hospitals, but there were no records of me. Then, on February 17th, my mother decided to contact the Santa Monica Police Department and reported my disappearance. Investigators looked into whether I was involved in any traffic accidents around that time, but nothing came up. My neighbor also hadn't heard from me since my disappearance. The police turned their attention to my ex-boyfriend, Todd, with whom I had a rather tumultuous relationship. They considered the possibility that he might have found me and harmed me, but he denied having seen me. Neighbors provided limited information, stating they saw me on Saturday, February 15th, and that I was going to a party. However, they didn't know who I was with or where the party was. My colleagues had previously informed my mother of this. This became the first lead in the case, and investigators began to verify this information. Later, a new detective was assigned to the case. Upon reviewing the gathered records, the photo of the missing woman shocked him. The victim looked very similar to another missing girl who was found dead in 1995. That girl was an aspiring model invited to a photo shoot for a magazine called Photographer, but the shoot never happened. The victim's name was Linda Sobek, and her killer was photographer Charles Redband. He lured the beautiful blonde to the countryside, where he raped and murdered her. However, the police officer knew that Linda's killer was already in prison at the time and couldn't have been physically involved in the case. It could have been a copycat of Charles, inspired by his methods and acting on his scheme. Detectives needed to find something connected to me, so my car, a white Mazda Miata, was put on the wanted list. Concurrently, while speaking with my mother, the investigators discovered more about my ex-boyfriend, Todd, and also learned about my new boyfriend, Lucas. However, my mother knew very little about Lucas, not even his last name, which complicated the search. Over 48 hours had passed, a critical period for finding missing persons. The police seriously believed I might no longer be alive. They began to examine the billing data from my cell phone. It revealed that the last outgoing call from my phone was made at 5:34 p.m., February 15th. I called the 411 help desk, which might have indicated I was in trouble, attempting to verify an address or phone number. The call lasted about 3 minutes, which could have been important for the police case, but the exact content of the conversation couldn't be determined, as these calls weren't recorded. After that call, my cell phone went dead. Its last known location was in the Ventura Boulevard area. The police then contacted the media to involve them in the investigation. Headlines immediately reported my disappearance, with hints of similarities to Linda's murder. Investigators searched the apartment where I lived for possible clues. They found a receipt from a lingerie store dated February 15th, the day I went missing. Police discovered that I continued to communicate with my ex-boyfriend despite his aggressive behavior. I occasionally visited his house, with the last visit on February 7th. The first truly significant clue detectives discovered was while examining information from my email account. On February 13th, I sent a message to the coordinator organizing the party. In it, I said that I was looking forward to the party and was going to buy a ticket. I was told that all the tickets were sold out, but that I was put on a special waiting list. This is a common tactic when event organizers with celebrities wanted to see visitors and offer VIP tickets at an inflated price. The police found my new boyfriend, Lucas, and spoke with him. He said he last saw me on February 14th, the day before I disappeared. They spent the evening together watching a movie and then said goodbye. The guy successfully passed the polygraph test, had an alibi, and didn't raise any suspicion from the investigators. After that, detectives spoke to my ex, Todd, but he also had an alibi. He was out of town, which several people confirmed. Of all the leads, the police were most interested in the party I attended and never returned from. They believed this held the key to solving my disappearance. Investigators contacted the event organizers and were shocked. It turned out I hadn't bought a ticket and didn't show up at the party. But then, where could I have gone? To reconstruct the timeline of events of that fateful evening, the police checked the transactions made by my bank card. Through this, law enforcement officers recognized and checked all the stores I had been to that day. The investigators were focused on examining any potential CCTV footage that might offer clues or show something out of the ordinary. This review proved time-consuming. While officers were meticulously sifting through the available information, the police received a concerning phone call. A woman named Susan Murphy reported a suspicious individual. She recounted an encounter with a man named Victor Thomas at a store. He was pretending to be a representative from a movie company holding casting calls for the new James Bond film. He pressured her, offering her the role of a Bond girl and complimenting her appearance. She was somewhat interested in the casting opportunity, but found him unsettling and declined at the last minute. Her husband, a former police officer, accompanied her as a precaution. He personally confronted Victor, seeking information about the man's intentions, but Victor fled without providing any valuable details. Susan investigated everything she knew about him, discovering he was lying. Victor Thomas had no connection to the film, and the man didn't exist. It was likely he fabricated the story, similar to Linda Sobek's murderer, to get acquainted with an attractive woman, though his motives were unknown. Even though Susan's experience concluded positively, Victor remained at large, potentially continuing his deceptive behavior. Thus, this information needed to be checked and Victor located. His intentions might be malicious. The investigators reviewed all the stores where Kristin had shopped on the day she vanished, checking the camera footage, but found nothing significant. They then opted to visit the stores and speak with the staff. During conversations with the saleswomen, the police provided a description of Victor, who targeted attractive women. In one of the stores, a saleswoman said she'd seen a similar man, but she couldn't provide additional helpful clues. An artist arrived to create a portrait of the suspect. The search for Kristin intensified, with police deploying dogs and volunteers to the area where she was last in contact. They also contacted the help desk. Patrols and volunteers were simultaneously searching for her vehicle and the missing person. The police received many reports of a similar car being sighted, but all turned out to be inaccurate. On February 24th, the police finally received a crucial call. They found her car, a white Mazda Miata, in a parking lot near the shopping center where Kristin had been. A forensic scientist arrived at the scene and conducted a thorough inspection, collecting fingerprints and all the available evidence. Inside the car, they found a water bottle in the back. They also discovered the missing woman's cell phone in the front seat. However, the real surprise awaited the investigators when they spoke to the parking lot security guard. The guard recalled a small incident involving the car. The car arrived at 5:45 p.m., but was reserved for another customer. A man got out of the car and, after learning about it, reacted aggressively to the guard's warning. He simply threw the car keys at the guard and left without explanation. There was no one inside the car, and unfortunately, there were no CCTV cameras in the parking lot, so the driver wasn't visible. With no leads, the detectives re-examined the girl's purchases that day and were shocked. On the day of her disappearance, Kristin had purchased a set of clothes identical to what Susan had described. When Victor had invited her to the casting call, he had asked Susan to buy the shortest possible black miniskirt, a white shirt, stockings, and shoes. All these items were paid for with Kristin's bank card. The police considered it more than coincidence, suggesting she might have fallen prey to a con artist with unclear intentions. Nearly the same thing had happened to Susan, but she had her husband's assistance. However, there was no information about Victor, and the investigators didn't know how to find him. The police contacted the girls Kristin lived with again. They recalled that Kristin was going to some casting call, but couldn't recall the specific details. During the conversation, they remembered it was definitely James Bond related. They said Kristin had been very excited before the event, and the description of the clothing she left the house in, a shirt and miniskirt, matched the officers' concerns exactly. Kristin was worried about being late for the audition, scheduled for 5:30 p.m. She was wearing the revealing outfit that Susan and, likely, Kristin had been asked to wear by the perpetrator. Detectives kept reviewing the camera footage repeatedly to find Victor, and he was finally recognized at the store where employees remembered him. But the footage quality was too poor to identify facial features. Nevertheless, it was a lead, and the investigators, with the help of witnesses, were able to restore the alleged appearance of the perpetrator. By February 26th, a sketch of the main suspect in the young woman's disappearance was made. One of the experienced detectives who reviewed the case files identified him as Victor Paleologus, recently released on parole on January 20th, 2003. He had been previously convicted of a sex offense. His violent criminal history included an incident where he lured a woman named Kristin Johnson into his apartment. He invited her to a party where many celebrities were supposed to attend. When she arrived, it was quiet and empty. He began harassing her, and when the woman resisted, he attacked her. The perpetrator used a rope, strangled her, and then intended to tie her up to rape her. However, the victim gathered her strength, broke free, fled the apartment, and sought help from neighbors. Victor Paleologos also employed the casting call promises as bait, offering the opportunity to participate in a party. It was a standard scheme for him. Here, near the Walk of Stars, it worked perfectly. Many young women came to Los Angeles pursuing their Hollywood dreams, and the perpetrators took advantage of this. The first time, the perpetrator was given probation for assaulting a woman. Then, there's the attempted rape of Kathy D. Buona in 1998, where he posed as Brian, a movie producer. He received a very light sentence for that attack. There is also reason to believe he had embezzled funds from the company where he had previously worked. Furthermore, there were many other female victims he had tried to rape. However, he got away with all of the police reports somehow because the victims had no evidence. He once assaulted an ex-girlfriend, breaking into her home. This was also a botched sex crime, but the perpetrator stole money and jewelry from the apartment. But even this crime he got away with, receiving only a suspended sentence. Later, in a more serious incident, he trapped a girl named Heather. Like the others, he persuaded her to dress in a way that seemed to excite him the most. He then tried to tie her up and rape her. The girl managed to break free. By some miracle, she pushed the perpetrator away with the sharp stiletto of her shoe. This provided her with the opportunity to flee into her vehicle. She then reported him to the authorities. Victor received a 2-year sentence for his crime, but he was released on parole on January 20th, 2003. This was just 3 weeks before Kristin vanished. As it turned out, the perpetrator reverted to his old ways as soon as he was released. By the time the police began their investigation, he was already in custody. This time, he had stolen a BMW X5 from Beverly Hills and attempted to sell it using forged documents. After being arrested for the carjacking, a wallet containing numerous stolen IDs, credit cards, and other documents was found in his possession. Victor Paleologos matched the profile of a criminal in Kristin's disappearance case, employing the same methods, and everything aligned, so the police decided to show his photo to Susan, who had managed to evade an attack thanks to her husband. At the police station, the girl immediately selected his photo from a lineup, and during the identification process, she also singled him out, stating that she instantly recognized Victor, despite his apparent attempts to alter his appearance. The man had slightly hunched over, stretched one arm longer than the other, and styled his hair differently, but his deception was uncovered. In a separate check, Susan's husband, who had attempted to apprehend the perpetrator, also recognized him. Unfortunately, the parking lot guard where the missing woman's car was found couldn't identify the perpetrator, as he had only seen him briefly from a distance in the dark and couldn't make out his face. Victor was behind bars at the time, but he had been free on the day of Kristin's disappearance. During interrogation, the criminal denied any involvement in Kristin's disappearance and denied any contact with Susan, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Victor refused to speak to the detectives without a lawyer, citing his recent parole and his fear of being framed, so the investigators continued to gather evidence against him. Soon, a new witness came forward, a realtor who had been working with Victor for the past few weeks and found his behavior strange. The suspect was looking for a house worth up to $700,000 through him. They visited several properties each day. This continued until word came that the deeds and keys to one of these homes were missing. However, the realtor didn't suspect that his client could be the thief at that point. Now that he had seen his picture in the police report, everything fell into place. The witness also identified the perpetrator. According to him, the last time they met was the day before Kristin disappeared. On that day, Victor was acting strangely, appearing nervous. In one of the houses shown, he went into the toilet and shouted from it, allegedly testing the soundproofing. The police suggested that he might be selecting a location with good soundproofing for committing crimes. The police examined each of the houses the intruder had visited. First and foremost, the house to which Victor had paid special attention. As it turned out, this house was in the same neighborhood where the missing woman's phone had last pinged. which was also suspicious. The police were searching for traces, any evidence that might point to Kristin. Maybe her body in the house, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, his apartment was also searched. Photos of women in his preferred attire were found on Victor's computer. It was the same miniskirt, white shirt, stockings, and stiletto shoes. By this point, the investigation had been ongoing for 12 days, but the missing woman's family was still hoping she would return home alive. Victor denied everything and didn't share any information with detectives. He only confirmed that he had seen Kristin, but then she left, and the man never saw her again. Victor Paleologos was born in '62 in Pennsylvania. He came from an ordinary family. The man was the youngest of 5 brothers, went to college, and earned a bachelor's degree before heading to Los Angeles to attend graduate school. He was married from '90 to '93. Interestingly, there is reason to believe that the criminal tried to poison his wife in 1991 when she claimed him. His attempts to organize a restaurant business failed. The image of a man with a grudge against the whole world, who had turned to crime. His fetish for beautiful women probably caused him to cross a dangerous line, and he began attacking them with the intent to rape them. Regarding the evening when Kristin disappeared, the perpetrator and his lawyer provided an alibi. Victor was meeting a friend at a restaurant. They had dinner. This information was confirmed, but the police knew that despite this, he had plenty of time to orchestrate another scheme with a new victim and kidnap her. On March 1st, the police received a call from a new witness. The man claimed to have seen the missing woman on February 15th. She allegedly stopped near his house and was looking for a mansion resembling a castle. The man himself didn't know where it was, but his wife overheard the conversation and told him where to go. It happened around 5:30 p.m. It is now clear that the call was made to the number 411. The girl was trying to find her way to the castle-like house and called the information desk. The police had a new lead, a house that looked like a castle. It was the same house Victor was soundproofing. Everything pointed to him. While the investigators were working with this information, a new event occurred. On March 3rd, 2003, teenagers were walking in Hollywood Hills. They were admiring the beautiful view of Los Angeles from above until one of them came to the edge and saw a strange object about 100 meters below. The teens began to look closely. They thought it looked like a mannequin. The boys started to descend, but still couldn't reach it. However, they were close enough to realize that it wasn't a mannequin, but a human body. The young witnesses couldn't decide what to do for a long time because they hadn't brought their cell phones with them. They decided to head to the police, and on their way, they met a woman who was walking her dogs. The teens told her about the gruesome discovery. The woman was able to get closer to make sure it was true. The victim's legs were bound and wrapped in a blue cloth. She was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt. Her hands were tied behind her back, and a hairband was left on her right wrist. Below the waist were torn stockings. The woman was frightened by what she saw and called the police. Soon, police and rescue workers arrived at the scene and, with great difficulty, managed to pull the body from the Hollywood Hills. The perpetrator probably hoped the body would never be found there. Perhaps it would have been so, if not for the inquisitive teenagers who accidentally wandered into such a hard-to-reach area. The medical examiner was able to identify the body as the missing Kristin Johnson. It was near the house that had looked so appealing during a viewing with a realtor that the victim was found. The police alerted Kristin's parents of the tragedy, and they were beyond distraught with pain and loss. Numerous bruises and scratches were found all over the murdered woman's body, indicating her desperate resistance. The condition of the body was bad. It had decomposed badly, having been in the heat for many days, and it had also rained for one day. The face was particularly hard to recognize due to the extensive injuries, and his head was tilted down. The girl's ear was torn off, and a significant bruise was present on her head and neck. These injuries resulted from skull trauma and strangulation, which were initially believed to be the cause of death. However, disturbing new details later emerged. Detectives were convinced that Victor Paleologos was responsible for the murder. Nevertheless, it was vital to prove that Victor had no alibi for the time of the victim's death. The police went to his friend Joey, who he supposedly had dinner with that night. It turned out that they were not friends, but rather acquaintances. Upon detailed questioning, it was also revealed that their meeting was scheduled much later than the time Kristin was last seen. According to the acquaintance, he had met Victor by chance the previous day. On February 15th, he was late for their meeting, arriving around midnight, even though they were supposed to meet much earlier. Victor had scratches on his face, which he claimed were from an accidental injury while moving. The police reconstructed the sequence of events that preceded Kristin Johnson's disappearance. The investigation indicated that Victor had picked up his victim at a shopping center, a location he often frequented for his criminal activities. He spotted the attractive young girl and decided to act. He introduced himself as a movie industry worker, as he often did, and offered the girl an audition for the role of James Bond's girlfriend. He was very convincing. Following his usual scheme, Victor showered the girl with compliments and explained that she was perfect for the role. Given the young woman's ambition and youth, she believed her attacker and could not refuse. The criminal arranged a meeting at one of the houses he visited with a realtor, explaining that it was a casting call. Kristin, realizing she was walking into a trap, prepared for the audition by wearing the clothes requested by the perpetrator. She arrived at the place slightly late, having gotten lost on the way, and contacted the help desk. She fell into a death trap from which she never escaped. She was harassed at the meeting, but she fought back desperately, scratching his face. She had nowhere to run, and the man was stronger anyway. Victor overpowered her, raped her, and killed her to prevent her from reporting him. He hit her on the head and strangled her, then dumped her body in the Hollywood Hills. The worst part was that the blunt head trauma and strangulation did not kill her immediately. She only lost consciousness, and the perpetrator believed she was dead. When the killer threw her onto the rocks, she fell from a significant height, sustaining further injuries. That's when she regained consciousness. Kristin died slowly and painfully in that place, never receiving help, and she eventually succumbed to her injuries. On May 12, 2003, the district attorney indicted Victor. He was charged with kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. However, the defense was fully prepared to defend their client's freedom, as there was no direct evidence against him. The prosecution faced an uphill battle, so the criminalists used their strongest arguments. The defense disputed the time of death, citing insects found on the body. However, all the similarities to previous victims and attacks by the perpetrator were brought up. These cases were so similar that they had to be highlighted in court. Preparations for the trial were delayed, and Victor Paleologos did not appear in court until July 2006. The defense emphasized that the prosecutor's office had virtually no physical evidence, no DNA, fingerprints, or CCTV footage linking Victor to the victim. This was attributed to the body being found 2 weeks after the disappearance, allowing significant decomposition, which destroyed all evidence. Nevertheless, when all the witnesses who accused Victor of harassment testified at the trial, the prosecution gained the upper hand. They all spoke about how the man was a skilled manipulator. He was so convincing that even the most skeptical individuals, like Kristin and Susan, initially believed him and agreed to participate in the casting, unaware of what awaited them. It seemed that there was no doubt in anyone's mind that this was his MO, and it was the defendant who killed Kristin, so the criminal used his trump card. To avoid the death penalty, he decided to make a deal with the prosecution and plead guilty to a lesser offense. It was up to the victim's loved ones to accept the deal. The trial had already lasted 3 weeks and was making little progress, with an uncertain outcome. Considering all the grief, the victim's family was willing to make concessions to bring him to justice. On the day of sentencing, the defendant wrote an 11-page motion to the judge asking him to withdraw his guilty plea. Fortunately, he was unable to do so. Victor Paleologos was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years.